Okay. Hello, everyone. Uh, have a great afternoon in eastern of Canada and the U.S. and good morning to the west of Canada and U.S. and good night to Europe and Middle East and Asia. So today we are very excited to have Professor Amir Manbachi from Johns Hopkins University. He's a professor in the Department of Neurosurgery and Biomedical Engineering, and he will share with us his journey towards entrepreneurship and how he leveraged his science and experience to create successful companies. And before that, like always, some housekeeping notes. We have Q&A box on the bottom of the screen. Please ask your question during the presentation, so we can ask the speaker afterwards. And and also we will record this talk also. And if you wanna have a refresher or any of friends missed the talk, you can share with them. Okay, next slide, Musan, please. Yes, our next seminar, e-seminar, is with Professor Heather Sheardon from McMaster University, Department of Chemical Engineering, and she's the Canada researcher in ophthalmic biomaterials and drug delivery systems. So please follow us on Twitter with the handle BME to get the most updated information about our upcoming seminars. And if you have any question, you can always email us, myself and Dr. Akbari, to share your feedback or questions. So like always, I would like to thank our sponsor, Montreal Transmedtech Institute, for supporting our e-seminar series. By that, I would like to introduce our speakers today. Professor Manbachi is an assistant professor of neurosurgery and biomedical engineering at Johns Hopkins University. His research interests include applications of sound and ultrasound to various neurosurgical procedures. These applications include imaging the spine and brain, detection of foreign body objects, remote ablation of brain tumors, monitoring of blood flow and tissue perfusion, as well as other upcoming interesting applications such as neuromodulation and drug delivery. His teaching activities include mentorship with biomedical engineering design teams, as well as close collaboration with clinical experts in surgery and radiology at Johns Hopkins. His previous work involved the development of ultrasound guided spine surgery. He obtained his PhD from the University of Toronto under the supervision of Dr. Richard Cobbold. Prior to joining Johns Hopkins, he was a postdoctoral fellow at Harvard MIT Division of Health Science and Technology and the founder and CEO of Spine Sonics Medical from 2012 to 15. A spin-off from his doctoral studies. Dr. Manbachi is an author on more than 30 peer-reviewed journal articles, more than conference processing, and 10 invitation disclosure patent applications, and a book entitled Towards Ultrasound-Guided Spinal Fusion Surgery. He has mentored more than 150 students, has so far been raised $15 million of funding, and his interdisciplinary research has been recognized by a number of awards, including University of Toronto's 2015 Inventor of the Year Award, Ontario Brain Institute 2013 Fellowship, Maryland Innovation Initiative, and Johns Hopkins Institute for Clinical and Translational Research Career Development Award. Professor Manbachi has an extensive teaching experience, particularly in the field of engineering design, medical imaging, and entrepreneurship, both at Hopkins and Toronto, for which he received the University of Toronto's Teaching Excellence Award in 2014 as well as Johns Hopkins Career Center's Award nomination for a Students Career Champion 2018, and finally Johns Hopkins University Whiting School of Engineering's Robert Pound Senior Excellence in Teaching Award in 2018. This list goes on and on, but due to of time, I will stop here, and Dr. Manbachi, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you, Human, and thank you, Mohsen, for the kind invitation. I'm trying to see if I can share my screen, so bear with me for a few seconds. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Perfect, thanks. So again, thank you so much, both Mohsen and Human, for the kind invitation. And today, what I thought about, I've been looking at the channel that you guys have created, and congratulations, that's an awesome initiative. Like, you're bringing the best of the people in translation together. And as I thought about, what I want to present, I was thinking, I want to talk about commercial translation, what I want to talk about clinical translation. And well, none of those two is something that by default engineering scientists think about, basic scientists think about. And then, as I reflect on my own career and the few experiences I may be able to share here, I thought perhaps it's best for me to talk about, ultrasound, and how, ultrasound can hopefully be clinically inspired and can ask questions and think about different applications of ultrasound as it relates to clinical aspirations and clinical applications. So today, I hope that I can share with you a few thoughts on my vision towards a clinically inspired ultrasound hub. And furthermore, I'll be talking about design and development and clinical validation of ultrasound probes, whether it's for imaging, therapeutics, sensing, or other applications. So I'm obligated by my institution, Johns Hopkins, which manages my disclosures, to disclose these on my talks. And I guess, as I'm talking about my journey, one of the sentences or phrases that resonates with me all the times is this famous quote by Oprah. Surround yourself with people who are going to take you higher. And as I talk about some of my mentors and colleagues and students who have been teaching me stuff, so I like to kind of bring back, come back to this phrase. So let me start with the fabulous department we have. So Johns Hopkins Department of Neurosurgery, it's ranked 1 in the nation. And not sure if you guys can see my cursor. Yes?
I think, can you move it? Yeah.
I'm moving it? Perfect.
Yes.
So starting from the top, we're blessed to have a fabulous chair, Dr. Henry Brem, who's famous for his work for co-founding gliadel wafer with Dr. Langer early on in his career. So as a mentor, he's been fabulous. And in addition to Dr. Brem, I like to acknowledge Dr. Nicholas Theodore, who's been a phenomenal mentor and the best boss one can ask for. And in addition to Dr. Theodore, Dr. Belsberg, Dr. Cohen, Dr. Luciano, Ian, Betty, and everybody in the department has really been instrumental to my career. And so a big thank you to everybody who's had, been helping me out starting my tenure track career. So equally, I've been learning a lot from my colleagues who have been teaching me how to teach design, innovation, and translation at the Johns Hopkins Biomedical Engineering Department. Hopkins BME is also ranked 1 in the nation for BME. And, I've been blessed to work alongside Nick Durr, Elizabeth Logston, Yusuf Yazdi and Shomo Acharya to co-teach, capstone design, innovation, and translation. And from one year to another, the students change, the projects change. We think about different problems, but we try to teach what every engineer should be thinking about, problem solving. So as part of this process of teaching problem solving, hopefully I've earned, some skills in terms of my own problem solving abilities. And our research team, really, again, this is, I'll talk to you about one recent initiative that we started that's funded by Department of Defense, DARPA. And this is where Dr. Theodore, Chad Restrick, Nidish Stakor, Monique Boydouin, Fra, and everybody else, Josh Doloff, the entire team, as well as our students, we've learned a lot from them. So we'll be also talking about my research activities. And we're open to expanding the team. So whoever is interested, I would love to hear from you guys. And last but not least, I would like to acknowledge all these sponsors who have helped us, get where we are, whether it's, ICTR grant, Career Development Award from NIH Source or DARPA or NSF or other local grants. We couldn't have been where we are today without your support. So as Human approached me and he said, why don't you talk a little bit about translation and entrepreneurship? I kind of struggled. I said, do I want to talk about science or do I want to talk about my journey? And again, congratulations to you both. You've created a phenomenal network of speakers. And as I listened to a lot of them, Dr. Khadim Hosseini, Dr. Santer, Dr. Karp, I'm humbled to be one of the speakers in these series. But, I thought I'm junior. If anything, I'm starting my career. So I thought of, talking about some of my failures and some of the resilience and perseverance that I had to practice to kind of get my career starting. So a little bit of it on the left-hand side, your time is limited, so don't waste it living somebody else's life. It's been really hard for me to look at people like, Dr. Langer, Dr. Khadim Hosseini, Dr. Theodore, Dr. Brem, and kind of see how they do things and kind of understand that, well, I'm not them, right? I'm not in their shoes. Maybe I'm not a surgeon. I don't have the same resources. I don't have the same skill sets. It's one of my things that I've been learning and hopefully I can relate to you guys is how do you look at these phenomenal role models and you learn what you can from each one of them and you make your own career path. So hopefully we'll talk about my journey a little bit. And then also on the right side, the important thing is never to stop questioning. So we'll talk about a few of the questions we have been asking ourselves, a few of the scientific questionings that we've been doing. So I hope this talk will be a mix of my journey as well as a little bit of science. And then again, as Human mentioned, this talk, I'll be talking about a vision I've had for a few years now, which is, can we have an ultrasound hub that people can come in, learn a few things about ultrasound and bring some contributions to the table, whether it can be an ultrasound imaging that you can see on the top right side, or whether it's like therapeutic ultrasound, can we burn brain tumors non-invasively using sound? You focus the sound and converts to heat. Can we do neuromodulation? What does it take to look into blood flow monitoring and perfusion Doppler ultrasound? And how slow of a blood flow and how small of a microvasculature can we see? There are applications such as piezoelectric surgery, whereby you can use sound to cut the bone, but leave the surrounding tissue, the neurons, and then some of the other soft tissue, the vasculature is safe. So that's one of the questions we're asking. Can we leave vasculature and neurons safe and still cut the bone? And then last but not least, I think on the top left, you can see some of the high intensity focused ultrasound, therapeutic ultrasound activities that people use to treat kidney stones, people used to do physiotherapy, people used to look at histotripsy and lithotripsy. We'll talk about all those things in a bit. But before that, a little bit about me as we're talking about my journey. So I was born in Iran in a family that was full of art, I hope. A lot of architecture, and this is our house where I was growing up. A lot of architecture and music. And I was blessed that my parents decided to immigrate to Canada as I finished my high school. So as we started my undergrad, I started in the University of Toronto. And again, I was blessed that, I went from, I immigrated with my family to one of the best countries in the world. And, Canada has really helped me grow into a person that I hope it's a better version of myself, trying to understand people from different cultures, from different backgrounds, try to practice some empathy and sympathy and listening skills, something that's very common in Canada, the cultural EQs, like understanding where people are coming from and how they think. It's not necessarily our way, and no way is better than the other. And as we immigrated to Canada, we were 18-year-olds. So my brother and I started this group called Chakalvak Ensemble. Chakalvak is the name of a bird in Farsi. And even though I didn't know much scientifically, but I think back even then, my brother and I kind of were showing signs of translation and entrepreneurship. So we started probably the first Persian Canadian band, or the first Persian music band in Canada. And then although all of us in this eight of us in this picture, we were undergrads at the time, we started a band that was financially, quote unquote, sustainable and successful. And we were able to go around the country from Winnipeg to Victoria to Vancouver, Ottawa, Montreal. We were lucky to go around the country, tour around the country, raise fundings for Heart and Stroke Society, Canadian I'm even blanking on some of the things we had raised money to donate. But then through this process of music, I was actually lucky that I was given the chance to meet some of the role models in the music, whether it's from the late Maestro Shajarian, Humayun, Dr. Ustad Kalhor, Kamkar, Beruzinian, Alizadeh, and all. I think I'm saying these things because to you, it may sound like this is not relevant to a BME talk. But in my opinion, it is. Because it's all about those subtleties. How do you work with a celebrity and you don't intrude their personal space and you don't intrude into their boundaries, and yet you keep that relationship? How do you be respectful, yet show that perseverance and persistence, right? How do you get your answers? How do you knock at the doors while people are busy? And, how do you ask for help when you need help, right? So I think all those skills, people think, if you're good at one thing and you're not so good at another thing, I just want to, hopefully, my point is some of these skills are transferable from one field to another. So if you're doing well in one thing, life will give you opportunities to practice more and more. Along the same line, I was lucky that while I was in undergrad, I met Dr. Khadim Husseini back in 2007. And I think the same stuff here. He was just going out of the lab from, he had just graduated from Dr. Langer's lab, and he was starting his own lab. And I think, as far as I know, was one of the first undergrads in his lab. And that was a time that he actually had a lot of time, believe it or not, that, I really enjoyed sitting down next to him. And as he was writing some review papers and grants, I was helping him out with create a little figure or, putting a literature review. As an undergrad, that was very helpful because I was able to see how a faculty thinks about things. And, Ali's one of those mentors that I've kept going back to him during ups and downs of my career. And I'm thankful to him. And, as he went through ranks in different institutions, I've had the, opportunity to also work with him in different, capacities, also a postdoc. What I really cherish about my times with him is when I was an undergrad, I learned a lot through good amount of FaceTime with him. So over the years, I kept in touch with him, but my first paper happened when I was an undergrad in his lab in HST/Brigham in 2007. So I co-authored this with, one good friend. And what we did is that this is the first paper that went on a lab on a chip. And I was doing the experimental work for how the cells dock in microfluidic channels, different width, different dimensions, different heights. And, my co-first author was looking into the computational fluid dynamics and how different flow rates and dimensions changes these microcirculations. And a lot of people were using and are using microfluidics, but how the geometry influences the shear stress and how that shear stress influences the location of the cell docking, that wasn't well known as much. And why is that important? Because in our body, different structures, different geometries, different flow rates dictate the different shear stress, right? And shear stress is the environment that cell feels. So that's important to know, gain a little bit of understanding about. And then also what's important is that, it's important to note how and under what flow conditions where you can localize the cells. That's something that tissue engineers think about a lot. I'm not a tissue engineer by training, but the little I knew about the fluid dynamics helped here. And so as I was an engineering sciences student at the University of Toronto, I was lucky that I had the training to think about fluid dynamics and biology and physics and electrical engineering. So I think that ability to think about and be able to kind of work with different fields started off from engineering science. And I'm grateful to all those mentors and teachers I had in my undergrad program at the University of Toronto, NSci program. So I moved on to my master's from 2008 to 10 at U of T, University of Toronto. And I work under David Steinman. And I looked at CCA, common carotid artery. You can probably see this vasculature that comes from the jugular vein. It comes to the head and it gets into the exterior carotid artery and interior carotid artery. And why do we care? Because a lot of plaques are built up here, and a lot of and the ability to understand where the plaques starts building up and how it relates to the geometry and flow is important to understanding stroke, how strokes and when strokes occur. So I was tasked with going from taking a lot of MRIs, 100 MRI images, segment them out into geometric features and trying to do geometric characterizations. Look at the best fit plane, best fit curvatures, and what's the radius of curvature in the thoracic area, in the cervical area, and do computational fluid dynamics. That's where I learned a lot about computational work from David. So if I may pause here. So I remember the conversation with David Steinman as I was graduating from my master's, and he asked me, he said, Amir, would you like to do a PhD? And if so, what would you like to work on? And I admire David for the type of stuff he does, and I still do. And he's a very computationally heavy scientist, well achieved, but he sits down behind the computer and writes all these codes that I couldn't frankly see myself doing. It just wasn't, the more I thought about it, it just wasn't what would excite me to keep on for the next 3 or 4 decades. And I remember telling him that, Dave, I really want to ask, I admire that people ask why. We look at the sky, scientists look at the sky, and they look at all the different stars, and they ask a question. They're like, why is it aligned that way? And that's the beauty of scientists. But equally, or even more importantly, more exciting for me was the ability to ask why not, right? Nobody else has done something, and then someone like Steve Jobs or Elon Musk comes along and says, well, why not? Why haven't we looked into this? People say Neuralink is really hard to get there, and it's impossible. And Tesla, all those stories. And somebody like Elon Musk says, why not? Let's do it. Whatever it takes, whatever funding, time, dedication it takes. So this is the aspirations that I share with David. And I said, David, I love asking why, but I also like asking why not. Is there anybody you know that I can look up to as mentor so that he or she can help me build things and be a better designer, hands-on engineer, and an innovator? So I like science, I love discoveries, but equally I like inventions, building things, inventions and innovations. So David introduced me to Dr. Richard Kobold. And this is actually when I was graduating from my master's. Both of us look younger. And Dr. Kobold is 80-something right now. I think next year, end of this year, he'll be 90. And I was one of the last, if not the last PhD student with him. And he's the author of this Bible of the Ultrasound book, Foundations of Biomedical Ultrasound. You can find anything about ultrasound in the book. And this picture is something I've plagiarized and taken from Ali's slides when he talks about Dr. Langer. And I remember Ali keep telling me that you want to surround yourself with right mentors. That's what Oprah Winfrey also says, right? And so the same way Ali feels about Dr. Langer, I felt about my mentors. And here, any moment that I was failing and I didn't know what I'm doing, I was getting stressed out, which I stress out a lot. So my mentors and students can tell you that. When I get stressed out, I had this mentor that he was looking at me and he would see the potential that maybe I wasn't seeing in myself. So a lot of the progress that comes onward is because of that mindset. And I've tried to be the same for my students when it comes to that. I don't look at their setbacks. I don't look at their weaknesses. We all have strengths and weaknesses. I look at their potential, and hopefully I can play a role for them to explore their potentials, fully explore their potentials. So this was what I did for my PhD. If you look at the left-hand side, there are all these screw implants that are inserted into the back of the spine. And if you look at this picture, it looks very beautiful, very easy. Yeah, we just want to avoid these red boundaries. But actually, if you step into the OR, there's blood all over the place, limited visibility. You're just looking at from one side. You can't see what's going on. And, believe it or not, literature reports a lot of error rates. So my goal was to make sure, can we look at the boundaries and kind of tell the surgeon in real time whether we're in the middle of the bone or not? And, you can look into this book that summarizes the activities of my PhD thesis. And what I really learned is that multidisciplinary research is key to translation. And so that central theme in this talk, if you're talking about translation, then we want to talk about how multidisciplinary, approaches help. So I felt my BME thesis was a little bit of clinical engineering, BME. I needed to know electrical engineering because ultrasound is electrical engineering. I just got my secondary appointment from electrical engineering at Johns Hopkins. And ultrasound is also mechanical engineering because it's all waves, it's sound beams, right? You can think about sound pressures. It's mechanical engineering. And ultrasound is also radiology. So ultrasound was a little bit of everything. So I learned a little bit of everything. And I worked with radiologists, mechanical engineers, elect engineers, BMEs, surgeons. So whether it was design and simulations of where is the focal point, how the sound pressure changes, or whether it was the hands-on fabrication that I got in device development lab in Sunnybrook Hospital with Stuart Foster, Mike Lee and all, or whether it was the software development with SimTech, this was the London group, Aaron Fenster group. So a lot of these activities was very multidisciplinary, and that, I feel that's the key to translation. If there is one thing I want you guys to remember from this slide, this talk, the take-home message would be, if you want translation, work with others, work with people who have skill sets that you don't have that can cover your weaknesses. And so, yeah, when you go to cadaver studies, can I do the surgery? Absolutely not. Does anybody want me to do the surgery? Absolutely not. But even on cadavers, I remember, this is actually the first time I went to cadavers, but I remember once trying on cadavers under surgical navigation at GPS and thinking that, well, it looks really easy for me to create these screw implant guide holes. And I looked at the GPS, I was like, this is super easy to create that. I created that guide hole. I took my pedicle holder out, and a little yellowish thing came out. And the surgeon looked at me, he was like, that's nerve root. You would have paralyzed the patient if this patient was alive. So even under GPS, I couldn't do these surgeries. So that speaks volume to why you need different people. Why do you need radiologists? Because I love my ultrasound technology, but it's hard to read. Ultrasound is really difficult to read. It's very qualitative, very operator dependent. And you want to compare with micro-CT or better or other image modalities. And that's where you need people who can read images. All right, let me focus a little bit on translation now, on the process of translation. Hopefully that's a little more key to what we're talking about here. My initial progress. I remember the first year of my PhD, 2010. I was sitting at Gerstein Library at U of D, and I drew a little something, a little design, sent it to Richard Cobbold and my surgeon co-advisor, Howard Ginsberg. And I asked them what they think of this idea. And they said, phenomenal. If you build this, you're done with your PhD. And my thought was like, well, I'm smart. After all, this wasn't that bad either. I can finish my PhD in a year or two. Wrong. It took me 5 years, and I still don't have that. Even after that, I didn't have that design built. So I was naive. And, what I didn't realize is that you need a lot of money to build stuff. And when you work in administrations, large corporate worlds, large administrations like University of Toronto, Johns Hopkins, sometimes things move at a snail pace. Sometimes other people nod out of bad will, but because they have other things on their plate and you're not a priority, they will just not sign the paper that it takes 30 seconds. Things may take 30 months. So I remember not having the ability to raise fundings and talking to my mentors a lot. And it took me first 2 years of my PhD, I did a lot of simulations, no progress on building stuff, which was what I wanted to do. I remember my committee members telling me, Amir, just do simulations and get the hell out of here. Just graduate. You can do with simulations. And I was just adamant. I remember one of the committee members, it was really harsh on me. He said, you're doing a lot here. You reduce it. And I said, well, can you help me reduce one of the aims? And he said, I got my PhD a long time ago. This is your PhD. You do it. And I just didn't want it to, eliminate the building part. That was what was exciting me. Remember the why not? I wanted to build stuff. I cared about inventions and innovations as much as I cared about discoveries. So what helped me is that my surgeon co-advisor suggested I'll go to Stryker and do an internship in an industry in Germany. So as an intern in Freiburg, in Breisgau, in Germany, among what my friends thought I'll do, what my family thought I was doing, what my boss thought I was doing, and what I was really doing, I got the sense of what does it take to build stuff. So I went to different places like the Porsche Museum, and ein gute Idee ist often überraschend einfach. A good idea is often surprisingly simple. And I got a sense of designs. I went to all of the design museums and car museums, whether it was Porsche, BMW, Mercedes in Germany. I went to a lot of design museums in Paris, France. And I was gaining a lot of language and cultural experience. And while, I was working actually full time. So the weekends was easy to, hop on a, Eurail, Deutsche Bahn, and get from Freiburg to Paris for 2 hours in 2 hours. And so during the weekends, I was getting life experience. And this is what my boss and my colleagues were encouraging me to do. And somehow, as I was working in Stryker, also I learned a lot about surgical navigation, these GPS systems that in real time can tell you where you are in the body. So this is their awesome nav system, their cranial nav system. And I had the ability to help them out a little bit that I could in their spine mass. So how do you go from an existing product for cranial mask and adopt it for spine mask. So the ability to work in industry, I think it was about 6 months, a little less, an ability to work with them as a work placement helped me understand the language that industry talks. So I joined University of Toronto in 2004, right? So I've been around academia for a long time. And my first academic internship with Ali Khanam Husseini was 2007. So I would say on the 14 years that I've been interacting with academics, I've also done a 6-month internship with industry. And that got me going into innovation. And a lot of people will tell you, if you want innovation, you need to work with people who are innovative. So Stryker was. And so I came back equipped. I was able to talk some of those languages. And Ontario Centers of Excellence, OCE, they rejected me for 2 times. When I came back from Germany, wrote the same application differently, phrased it differently, talked about market opportunity, competitive analysis, IP landscape. First, I went to them and I said, look, we have this patent. And they were like, is this industry relevant? And I went back to them and I said, yeah, all these industries are working on it. And they were like, well, it's a competitive landscape, then there's nobody who can make money out of it. So all these back and forth. So as I went to Germany, Freiburg, and I worked at Stryker, I learned how to write these translational grants, academic/industry grants. So for the 3rd time that I applied for Ontario Centers of Excellence, OCE, they gave me $50,000. And when it rains, it pours. So I got approached by Ontario Brain Institute, OBI. They gave me another $100,000. And we started a company called Spine Sonics Medical. This is John McRitchie. This is Laura Yu. John was the first one that, when I first went to OCE and did the dry run, he was this nice person that would make you feel comfort, but he would tell you the most harshest comments that will help you. And that's the type of mentors you need. You need people who will tell you what to do, but in a way that you actually are amenable and coachable. So through OCE and OBI's sponsorship, I was able to talk to Dr. Reza Moridi, the Ontario Minister of Research and Innovation back then. And, I thought this snail pace was going away. I thought I'm going fast. I had $100,000 and I thought I'm close to finish line. But what I realized is that actually the closer I thought I got to finish line, the more I realized I'm actually farther away from the finish line. So one thing that I think at the time, Dr. Santer told me, he was a chair of IBME at the time. He told me, you should be smart enough to know that you're not smart enough to do everything. So this Oprah Winfrey's comment, right? I surrounded myself with other people. I wasn't able to think about regulatory pathways, talk to Health Canada, talk to FDA, get a PhD, write a thesis, right? All those things and raise fundings. So I surrounded myself with the right people on the right bottom side, and we started expanding the team. So we went from 2013, me and Dr. Cobbold. This is a water tank that I failed a lot and learned a lot. Going to 2014, our first employee was Catherine Gedichinsky. Second was Atena Keshavarzian. And I was TAing a course called Medical Imaging, and I hand-selected the best students in the classroom. They helped me raise fundings. Atena was our experimentalist. Catherine was helping me with writing the grants, and through them, we started expanding. Farrokh came on board, Spencer, Shervin, and Caitlin came on board in 2014. And in 2015, when I was leaving, it was a larger crew. And, this is Zavi Aviv and Shahrukh Shahriari. Dr. Santer told me, if you want to, learn new things and, get new life experiences, you need to park your achievements. It was really hard for me to park my achievements and move on. So as an ability to bring new CEO and CTO helped me kind of move on. And so I started talking about how at the beginning I couldn't write grants, I couldn't get money, but through perseverance and rejections, I got $50,000 from OCE, OBI, and so on and so forth. I think we got Conrad Award, we got Mars Innovation, and we got FedDev Ontario for $500,000 for the next 5 years at the time. And then we also got NSERC I2I, Idea to Innovation. So I think overall we raised about, if I'm not mistaken, $800,000 Canadian, non-dilutive. And I thought I had done a lot until we talked about CEOs, and they were like, yeah, I can pick up the phone, raise way more funding fast. And well, I'm grateful to IBME, Institute for Biomedical Engineering at University of Toronto. Back then we used to like IBBME. I was going back and forth twice a week to Sunnybrook Hospital Device Development Lab, where I used to build a lot of these ultrasound transducers. That's the translation, going from an idea in your mind to building things. And Simtech, Center for Imaging Technology Commercialization, they have a branch at Sunnybrook, Toronto, and they have a branch in London, Ontario. And I work with them both for the software development as well as their regulatory pathway. Was this a 510K? Was it Class 2? Was it de novo with FDA? I started learning those things as part of my PhD. And none of this was about me. It was adding a contribution that brought me to talk to different people, expand my network. And this is the hardest part. This was the hardest part for me. When things was going well, if I wanted to learn new things, I had to let go. And so I was looking up to people like, Dr. Langer, Dr. Khadim Husseini, and I wanted to be an academic, and I didn't want to just have one company. I wanted to keep having other companies. So the hardest part was for me to let go of the company, give it to Sylvie and Shahrukh, let go of my family in Toronto, and join Harvard as a postdoc, and then Johns Hopkins. And I think a person that was very instrumental in helping me understand that sometimes you have to let go of the things that you love was Dr. Santer. And for that, I'm grateful. Thank you, Paul, if you're listening to this. I still remember the words of wisdom you have given me. So yeah, he helped me learn that sometimes I'm learning to love the sound of my feet, walking away from things not meant for me, even if you love them. Had I stick to Spine Sonics, 9 out of 10 companies fail. I would have made it successful. I would have done my best to make it successful. But it just wasn't what I wanted to do. I didn't want to run one company and get stuck in writing checks, getting into HR issues, making sure that people are getting paid and compliant and this and that. I was less of, I'm a bad operations manager. I'm probably a better translational thinker. I hope so. And now that I realize you need to realize your strength, and it takes time for you to even get to know yourself. So get to know yourself and learn to let go, even if you're at the peak. My second attempt at translation after spine sonics was neurosonics, and that's what happened at Johns Hopkins. So as I joined Hopkins, I heard a lot that people are thinking about minimally invasive surgeries. People want to have less blood loss, less infection rate, less recovery times. Very understandable. But for that to happen, you need miniaturized devices, and we're talking about precision medicine these days a lot. And so for that to happen, you need an ultrasound transducer that's minimally invasive. This is our first prototype, so by no means I'll call this minimally invasive. Literature suggests that if you can insert this into a 7 millimeter diameter, if you can insert this into a test tube that's 17 millimeter, the size of a dime, then you are minimally invasive. However, if you show this lab prototype to a patient and say, I'm going to shove this into your head, they would panic. I would run away if I was a patient. So don't take this as a product. It's the first prototype we're working on. But, as I was learning about minimally invasive surgery, understandably, the surgeon wanted the smaller, the better. Again, less infection rate, less blood loss, less recovery time, less time at the hospitalization, so less cost. Patients are going to love it. Surgeons are going to love it. However, this is kind of contradictory at conflict with what physics tells us. So physics tells us if you want to burn something through ultrasound, then the larger the aperture, the better. The larger your surface area, you want a huge bowl so that you have more resonation, so that you end up having a better energy deposition. Now, if I was going to go with what physics wants, we would end up having a brain scoop. That's not what we want. So our challenge was, how do you make things small enough that fits into this minimally invasive test tube and it still operates? So we came up with this design and worked with a company called Sonic Concepts in West Coast, Seattle. I think Bothell is the name of that city. And it's a image-guided therapeutic ultrasound. So it's a miniaturized custom hybrid probe. So it's minimally invasive. It's ultrasound-guided ultrasound therapy, high-intensity focused ultrasound probes. Notice how there's a common theme here. When I was doing my PhD and I was working on spine sonics, I worked with Stryker and I learned from Stryker. When I'm working on neurosonics, I started working, and we're still working with Sonic Concepts. So there's always been an industry supporting the creation of another industry that can give you job creations, and so on and so forth. So essentially what this is that you see this gray imaging probe. We took it out of the IP105 from Sonic Concepts with their consent, and they actually helped us do this. And this is their H245. We just needed to miniaturize that so that you can have a ultrasound-guided ultrasound therapy, minimally invasive ultrasound. And this is a video that demonstrates how this probe can burn and can treat some lesions in solid water phantom, tissue mimicking phantoms in a water tank. So I apologize for the image quality or video quality because it's in a water tank and there's a little bit of a blurriness. So, but if you stick to somewhere here, if you see my cursor, look at here for a good 5 or 10 seconds, you'll see how that treatment happens. The idea is that sound accumulates here and it converts to heat, and it does take care of the treatment at that lesion. Great. So the tissue mimicking phantoms helped us understand how the treatment lesion is in different directions. It looks like a grain of rice, 2 millimeter by 10 millimeter. How does it work if you apply the sonication 10 seconds or if you apply the sonication for 30 seconds? And we published this as minimally invasive therapeutic ultrasound in Elsevier's Ultrasonics journal. It's the journal we love to publish, or any acoustic engineer would love to publish. And we got featured as the editor's choice for their 2020 papers. This would have not happened had I not been working with Dr. Al Cohen. He's a chief of pediatric neurosurgery, taking over the division after Dr. Ben Carson. And Al was phenomenal to work with. Mari Groves was phenomenal to work with. And if it wasn't for these amazing people, we wouldn't be able to even start a company. So this company is by no means close to market. We've just started that. It's probably a class 3 because it's therapeutic, and it may end up being a PMA, pre-market approval, as opposed to pre-market notification FDA pathway. And I really like to point out Dr. Neo Jennifer Gamo, and her and I met when we were both doing customer discovery. We were getting out of the building, talking to a lot of people who would end up using the system, who would, or are paying for the system, who writes the checks, getting to know those things. And iCore program is something that taught us to get out of the building and talk to people who are the admins who are trying to order these devices into the system. What's the reimbursement code? Who is the decision maker at the hospital? We met then. So through that mechanism, we got funded by NSF, National Science Foundation, about $50,000 to do these iCore interviews. And through NEO, I met people at Maryland Development Center, MDC. So this is Gil Blankenship and Stephen Restaino. And we started a team that we were working, and we got funded by TEDCO, Maryland Initiative, to get the project going. So through MII, Maryland Initiative, through Cohen Award, and through NSF iCore. And we just also recently got an NSF STTR phase 1 that I think we're about to be done. So we're hoping to continue through the path phase for this company called Neurosonics. And I realize, I'm 12:45, but I've already talked to the hosts and I've asked for another 15, 20 minutes. So now that I talked about spine sonics and neurosonics, I would love to talk to you about my most recent journey, which is all we're doing pretty much all of my time, 100 hours a week, working on this journey, which is funded by Darpa. This is Dr. Nicholas Theodore. He's the division chief, he's the chief of spine division at Johns Hopkins Neurosurgery department. He's also the chairman of NFL head, neck, and spine surgeons. So he goes to Super Bowl events every year. And he's a surgeon that works a lot with engineers. He's worked with Dr. Langer. He has started a company called Excelsius Robotics. It's a spine robotic system that got bought up by Globus System. And he went through the FDA path phase. He got his very first human trial at Hopkins a few years ago. And he's been part of a Spine Align company, which I've had the pleasure to co-mentor with him. But all in all, he's a great boss, he's a phenomenal mentor and co-PI on the Darpa award we have. And this is the common theme. When I at the beginning, when I was getting inspired by Dr. Langer as an 18-year-old, I noticed how much he works with surgeons like Dr. Brem. He teams up with Dr. Vacanti. I looked at Ali, and for example, Ali works a lot with Rami. So the ability to work with clinicians, it was also another friend of mine. So whether it was my PhD, or whether it was Al Cohen and Mari Groves in the second neurosonics company, or whether it's Dr. Theodore here. So because of Dr. Theodore, I got into thinking about spinal cord injury. Here's one challenge we have about spinal cord injury. Let's look at the left bottom image, all the microvasculatures of the spinal cord. Spinal cord is the size of a pinky finger. So I don't see myself, but hopefully you guys can see my pinky finger. Imagine something as small as a pinky finger and a lot of microvasculature on that. And the largest one, PSA, posterior artery, or ASA, anterior small artery, this is 200 microns. So good luck being able to visualize what's happening here. And visualization is the key because you want to know how far your injury is growing. There's something called primary injury. You can read the text now. There's something called primary injury, spinal cord injury, which is a direct mechanical trauma. And when that happens, neurons won't regenerate. So you can't do much about the shock, the impact, right? You can't do much about the direct trauma. But what you can do is you can try to minimize the growth of that injury. So whether it's stroke, or whether it's traumatic brain injury, or whether it's spinal cord injury, what you want to do is that you want to take care of the patient as fast as you can and minimize those injuries in the neighboring penumbral zones. Because otherwise, that secondary injury will grow, and the difference between few hours, it may be the ability for the patient to move their hands. So secondary injury is what happens in the penumbral and neighboring zones, and we want to minimize that. So the red part here is a direct primary injury. Green is okay. What we're trying to do is we're trying to minimize this blue region. So how do we do that? How do we know what's happening? How do we know at what rate blue is growing? We need a system, we need a device that can monitor that trauma site. So currently, there is no method to ensure spinal cord perfusion after surgery. So, but what the surgeons do is that they take out these bony landmarks out. The bones are called lamina. So when you take these laminas out, the surgery is called laminectomy. And so you have access to this spinal cord protected by this layer called dura. That's a protective layer around the spinal cord. I apologize. And this dura is surrounded by this fluid called CSF, cerebrospinal fluid. That's the fluid that's protecting both the brain as well as the spinal cord. So if you're driving and a car accident happens and this happens, for example, for concussions, this fluid is meant to protect further injury. That's something I'll talk about shortly. But so what you want to do is one thing as a biomedical engineer, clinical engineer, you don't want to do is you don't want to change the clinical workflow. If you tell a surgeon to change their surgical workflow, they will not touch your system. I think that's another take-home message from my slides. You need to scrub in, you need to go to the operating room, you need to become a student again. No matter if you're a full professor or a postdoc or assistant professor or an undergrad or a high school intern, go into the OR, shoulder by shoulder, look at the surgeries, see their workflow, learn their workflow, hear their workflow, practice listening skills. And the surgeons may tell you something, they may do another thing. So if you want to be a good clinical engineer, you need to become a good listener. You need to become a good observer. So you need to go to surgery, see that when the surgeon takes all these bony landmarks out, what do they do? And, hear from them that Dr. Theodore tells me, oh yeah, I have this ability to put this Band-Aid on top of this dura. And if your Band-Aid can help me monitor the site of injury and treat the site of injury, for example, therapeutic ultrasound, we can do that. So as soon as I heard that from Nick 5 years ago, I'm an acoustic engineer. So the first thing I thought about was my hammer is ultrasound. So I like to apply that hammer to all the nails in front of me. So I said, would ultrasound do? And he asked me, what are the applications of ultrasound? And I said, well, with ultrasound can do a lot. Ultrasound can detect blood flow. So he said, I love that. I need that. And I said, ultrasound can do something called neuromodulation. So if there's one nerve that's, remember the secondary injury that I told you about? If you want to minimize that, what you want to do is you want to do ultrasound neuromodulation. What that means is that you want to excite or inhibit neurons. For those of you guys that may be a little more junior, you don't know what that means. Exciting neurons means the neuron is getting injured and dead, and what you're doing, you're doing this to them. You're trying to wake them up. So another lesson that I want you guys to remember. So I want you guys to remember that I said, be a better listener, be a better observer, and surround yourself with the right mentors. But I would say the third key take-home message today from my talk, hopefully, is going to be that you're going to fail, no doubt. Pause. You're going to fail. But be prepared to fail and be prepared to use those failures towards your success. As Oprah puts it, turn your wounds into wisdom. As Elon Musk says it, people think this is a sign of depression, but I think it's the reality of the world, whether you love it or not. The reality is great highs, terrible lows, and unrelenting stress. Don't think people want to hear the last two. But you're going to fail. Use that failure towards your own success. And this is, as I was talking to Huma, and I picked up the phone and I said, Huma, what do you want me to talk about today? And he said, talk about your journey. Talk about what's been instrumental to your quote-unquote success in the eyes of the society. And this is my wall of shame. I'm putting it out there in front of you guys publicly, that all the red stuff are all the grants I got rejected for this project. So probably I got about 20 something, close to 30 rejections for one idea. But, who cares? I got rejections from 20 plus people, 30 people. But at the end of the day, DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Project arm of the Department of Defense, supported our project for $13.5 million. So this is what matters. Your failures are secondary. Your successes matters, and you only need to succeed once. So through the Bridging the Gap Plus program, we're able to get funded. Thank you, DARPA, for supporting us. And again, remember, you're going to fail, but if you can dream it, you can do it. So take-home message, remember, if you want to succeed, resilience and perseverance are key. So through that amount of funding, we're able to grow our team. I have the pleasure of working with Dr. Nicholas Theodore as a co-PI of the grant. Chad Restrick, believe it or not, him and I go back both to Weeds Institute in Boston when I was doing my postdoc with Ali. So he was also in Boston. I met him at Whiting School of Engineering again at Johns Hopkins, and we asked him if he can join us and help us out at School of Medicine, neurosurgery department. I had the pleasure of working with Nitish Thakor, admire him as a mentor. He's well known for prosthetics and neuroengineering, and I'm a neuroengineer. As much as I'm an acoustic engineer, I'm also a neuroengineer, and Nitish is helping me learn those things. He's helping us with small rodents, understanding what it takes to do neuromodulation with ultrasound, what parameters. Josh Doloff is also a trainee from Bob Langer's group. He's helping us with understand what materials does it take for our implant to be biocompatible. And I have the pleasure of working with Javad and Jennifer, two assistant professors at the Department of Radiology. Javad is the director of ultrasound division of radiology. And he told me, Amir, we have a Philips Epic system and we have a Canon Aplio i800 in radiology. You want to have those systems. Those are the state of the art. And when I was doing my budget, I put both of them, trying to have the exact systems that radiology department has. Because if you want to do translation, you don't want to work in isolation and in silos in your lab. You want to work with the system that radiology has for the patients. Yes, it's going to be expensive, but it's going to be needed for your translation because FDA will question you, what system did you use? And we're growing our team, so we would love to hear from you if you're interested. So in addition to Hopkins, we're working with Sonic Concepts. Carl Morrison is the president. He's helping us build the front-end components of the sensors. Ken Shepard from Columbia is helping us with the back-end components of the sensor. Remember that Band-Aid on the top of the spinal cord. So the Band-Aid is going to be designed by us. Nitish is going to help us with the parameters for ultrasound, neuroengineering. Josh is going to help us with the material. Javad and Jennifer are going to help us, understand what it takes, what frequencies for the images to be readable. Carl is going to help us build it. Ken is going to help us charge in a wireless fashion, so you can, you can have all these A6 chips that are wirelessly charging the system. So they send the power wirelessly and they receive the data wirelessly. And Hopkins APL, I have the pleasure of working with Monique Boydouin. She's the program manager. Francesco Tenor is our technical PI there. Steve Babin is helping us with oxygenation sensing, and George Cole's a phenomenal friend of mine. He's helping us with pressure and temperature sensing. And I think overall there's about 35 people in this project so far. We need to grow it fast to 50 people. So we need the best talents out there. If you know anybody, help us out. Help us find the best talent out there. We named the center called Hepius. Hepius is a Greek god of healing. And also we like it to stand for this: holistic electrical, ultrasonics, and physiological interventions on bordering those with spinal cord injury. Darpa likes this term called system of systems. And so Hepius has system of systems. It consists of the music implant. Music is our multifunctional device, the implant that you see here and you saw in the neck before. It's multifunctional because not only it has ultrasound imaging and ultrasound therapeutic, but it also has electrical recording and electrical stimulation. Acme implant or insert, Acme device, is a spinal. So remember I talked about CSF, the fluid that protects the dura and spinal cord? We need to drain this. So you see the CSF drainage catheter. The surgeons drain these things because the spinal cord is swollen. So if you have any trauma, whether it's in your finger or anywhere, it swells. Now, if you have a neurotrauma, your spinal cord injuries, your spinal cord swells. Now, if you keep the CSF fluid on top, it's not going to help. It's actually going to do more compression, which means more damage, which means the secondary injury will grow faster. So the surgeons are draining these things as part of their workflow. So again, we're not changing the workflow. What we're doing though, when I asked Nick, how much are you draining these? He seems confident because of his experience. However, what he has asked us to do is, how much is enough? So in other words, you can drain these CSF, but we don't know how much drainage is enough. And the answer is it depends on the oxygenation, temperature, pressure of CSF. Now, in engineering terms, what's lacking is a feedback loop mechanism. Engineers are going to love this term, feedback loop mechanism. So we are building an Acme insert that helps us understand again, surgeon does the same workflow. They drain the CSF, and they're going to tell us what's the oxygenation, pressure, temperature, so that the surgeon knows exactly based on that temperature, if there's ice involved, and if you're cooling the spinal cord, how much to drain. Same thing with music implant. You're placing this, we want to know what are the perfusions happening, how fast the secondary injury is growing, whether it's growing, and if the tissue perfusion is going up, down, or the same. And depending on that, you want to use your therapeutic ultrasound. You want to use your electrode stimulations. And the beauty of this is if you have the ability to monitor tissue perfusion in an implant, then you can take that. Implant is much harder to build than a wearable system. So what if you take this implant, use it as a wearable on the hands, on the skin, and use that for people with skin burns, skin grafts? Can we see that tissue perfusion going up, down, or the same? The trends are important. So this is a picture of the music implant, the Acme insert. And talking about translation, I realize I'm hitting the time right now. Human and Mohsen, do I have a few more minutes to wrap up? This will be key to translation.
Yes, for sure, yes. Amir. We are really enjoying your inspiring thought. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So yeah, if that's the case, let me take a deep breath, pause, because I want you guys to remember this slide. I want you guys to remember this slide because this is only the phase 1 of a multi-year, multi-institution grant. And you notice we're already talking, IDE is investigational device exempt. We're already talking to FDA while we're doing engineering. So the device needs to be implanted in a human in 5 years. We just submitted something to FDA yesterday. So imagine how far in advance you have to start that conversation. And so we're doing something called pre-sub meetings, informational meetings. FDA is going to be in listening mode. They're going to give you advice. And this is your chance to ask them questions as opposed to the other way around. Phase 1 is a year and a half of engineering work. Just design, just engineering. It's long hours for all of us. We're working like 100 plus hours a week, really pushing ourselves. But that's DARPA. That's fast-paced, futuristic. DARPA was behind funding internet, GPS, a lot of these futuristic things. We like to be on the same caliber with them. So we're doing our best. And whether it's the Acme system, whether it's the music implant, whether it's understanding the parameters to do tissue perfusion, or whether it's building this is all phase 1. So within 18 months, we should be done with a lot of our engineering, most of our engineering. And you see that every month, all these like yellow, green, blue stuff, I have to keep on top of it. Every month we're talking to DARPA. They want slides, they want reports, they want conversations. They pick up the phone, they ask how you're doing, whether COVID is affecting you or not. After phase 1, year and a half, we're going to start our animal studies for 2 years. And we're going to do large animal studies like pigs, small rodents like rats. We're going to fail. We're going to come back and redo our engineering. One thing I've learned from teaching design is, as a problem solver, you think, you build, you test, you document. And then you think again, you build stuff, you test, you're going to fail. You think, build, test again. You think, build, test again. So Yusuf Yazdi at CBID Center at Hopkins has this beautiful analogy that is published that engineering design is a spiral roll. So you think, build, fail. You think, build, fail. And in fact, when you go to FDA, your investors, they would love to see your design history files. If you show them, this is my first design, I love it, they're going to be like, huh, the dude is naive. If you go to them with 50 failures, 20 failures, and you show them and it's documented in your DHF files, they're going to be like, they have done their homework. So next 2 years, we're going to do animal studies. The beauty of working at Hopkins and working with surgeons like Nick is that we already start our animal surgeries. So I know what's going to fail. Our hope, not that I know what's going to fail, I'm learning, trying to learn what else can fail. So a year and a half of engineering work, followed by 2 years of animal studies, followed by a year and a half of human studies. That's DARPA fast-paced. That's ambitious, but it's futuristic projects. It's a blessing and a curse. We asked for this and we're loving it. Again, first year and a half, we're doing engineering. So for example, for task 1.1 of understanding what does it take for perfusion monitoring to happen, optimal parameters, we're using microfluidic systems. What I learned at Ali's lab, and Shrike Zhang is also helping us having these systems. How small of this microvasculature can we see? And frankly, silicones are not ultrasound friendly, so we're trying to think outside of the box. This is because if you go to small animals or large animals, you're doing your stuff, things will fail. Frankly, as an engineer, I don't know where it's failing. So I need to think about it as a controlled engineer parameter, say, let me keep everything fixed. Let me change this one parameter and see what's failing. So we need to start from in vitro, make sure we know what we're talking about, then go to small animals, make sure we know what we're talking about, and then go to human studies. And then trust me, you go to human, you're going to fail. You're going to come back to in vitro. Yusuf Yazdi's spiral model. This is what I learned from radiologists. Apparently, I'm being told that the state-of-the-art systems, there are only few systems out there that do microvascular imaging, tissue perfusion monitoring to really high standards. So, and these are like state-of-the-art because these things have been out there for only like about 2 years as far as I know. So Philips Epic system does something called MFI, microflow imaging, and now they have MFI HD. Canon Aplio has this thing called SMI, super microvascular imaging, beautiful images. If you're interested in perfusion, you want to see these things. Again, this is sound. It's portable, it's cheap relative to MRI. 7 Tesla MRI would be $7 million. So it's portable, sound is cheap, there's no ionizing radiation. And the good news is that we're working with radiologists who are using these on patients on a daily basis. So we bought these for our labs. Whatever works on our probes and our systems is directly applicable to clinical systems. And the beauty of Hopkins is that labs are 5 minutes walk from the OR. I'm in the lab. I scrub in. I go into the OR. I observe, shadow, and then I pick up the phone, call my postdocs who are doing small rodents in another building that's also 5-10 minutes walk away. And my boss calls. He says, I'm in the office. I go to his office after he's done with his clinic. So we're lab and clinic and preclinical animal labs and office space labs. Everything is within walking distance. That's what I admire about Hopkins environment. So we talked about in vitro studies. I'm being aware of time, so I'll skip through some of the details. But essentially, the things we use in vitro studies are these amazing systems, general purpose ultrasound phantoms that has all these cysts and strings. If you have strings that you connected to motors with different waveforms, you have the ability to, the motors will dictate how those strings are changing different waveforms. And the strings will have a fluid dynamic effect on the water in this water tank. And then you kind of use your ultrasound system, hang it from here. You can see what's going inside. That's the Doppler string phantom, the general purpose phantom, the near field phantom, CIRS phantom, and the microfluidic systems you're getting from Shrike. These things are all helping us. I'll skip some of the details in the interest of time. Again, we think a lot about what does it take, what frequency does it take to see the grayscale, to see the type of images we want to see for, again, slow flow and small microvasculature. We ask ourselves the questions of how slow of a flow can we see? How small of a microvasculature can we see? And we have probes at 22 megahertz or 33 megahertz are what we currently work with. This hockey stick probe is our favorite. Center frequency of 20 goes from 8 to 22 megahertz. It's doing a job done for a lot of our small rodents and large animal studies. Love the hockey stick probe. Yeah, so we think about what does it take to get good grayscale images, ultrasound grayscales, continuous wave color Doppler, pulse Doppler, spectral Doppler, so on and so forth. Coming back to translation. So one of the beauties of working with surgeons is that you could walk into the pig surgeries. It's a few minutes walk away. What you see here is a surgery on a pig. By the way, for anybody who doesn't like seeing blood or animals or surgeries, look away for the next 30 seconds. What I'm going to show, 30 seconds after I'm done with my talking, what I'm going to show is the ability that you drop a weight, you induce a spinal cord injury, and then you use this. So the black thing here, the black box is a weight, you induce injury. And then the yellow thing is our ultrasound commercial systems that we use to understand what parameters does it take to give neurosurgeons the images they want to see. So heads up, a little bit of surgery for a few seconds. Gonna show it one more time. Notice how when you drop, when Eric Westbrook, our chief resident, drops this weight, the pig jumps a little bit. That's a sign of injury. All right, so again, don't look for whoever doesn't like surgeries. We take these bony landmarks called lamina out. When you do the laminectomy, you expose the spinal cord dura. We use our ultrasound systems. In this case, it's Clarius. It's a handheld wireless systems that you can take a probe anywhere you want, and you can visualize stuff wirelessly on your iPad. Very portable, very user-friendly, probably not the best image quality, but again, it's meant to be portable. So people are using this wireless handheld Clarius health system, visualizing stuff on our iPads. And this is actually done on our Canon SMI. See all these beautiful microvasculature and sagittal and axial views. That's a sign of perfusion. And we play around with the frequencies. What can we see with 8.5 megahertz? Note the pulsatility of the spinal cord. What can we see with 5 megahertz? Probably less, right? What can we see with 12 megahertz? Note all this beautiful microvasculature, right? That shows the perfusion we are after. Once we're done, we take the spinal cords, we'll look at the geometric characterizations, because as an acoustic engineer, I need to know where I'm focusing the sound. How far away is the focal point? How wide or narrow this thing should be, because the narrower it is, the more resolution, the better, the sharper the image is, right? So you want better resolution. But you need to know if you're placing your sensor here, should I focus half a centimeter away, a few millimeters? Again, what's my focal point? What's my resolution? And we do human studies a lot. Not with our sensor yet, but then again, FDA wants us to know what we're talking about. So surgeons go into the OR and use ultrasound, play around with the parameters. We are working with a company called Sonic Concepts with Carl Morrison. We're aiming to build a flexible Band-Aid that has both electrical monitoring of neural activity and electrical stimulation, as well as the ultrasound stuff, all within 18 months, imagine, right? Sonic Concept is giving us a water tank, a conditioning unit, a degausser unit that allows us from a physics standpoint to have transducers and hydrophones, everything on a water tank. We need transducers will burn if you use it in air. So we need water or gel. And the water tank is where we do a lot of our fundamental physics studies. I briefly talked about APL, Monique, Frost, Steve, and George, and how they're helping us out with this catheter to make it smarter. And the final thing I'd like to say is that what I didn't realize is that in addition to DARPA being a full-time career, when you start your tenure track, you need to produce. In addition to that, a full-time job is construction of your lab space. So as you're talking, my architect is actually calling me a few times. And so we're talking on a daily basis. Sometimes it's stressful because he will ask you, what do you need for your lab space? Sometimes you don't know the cut sheets. Sometimes you don't know the city permits codes. So I encourage you guys, when you could visit after the end of the world is done, post-COVID, visit us at Hopkins Bayview Alpha Center. We have about 4,000 square feet of lab space, a little more, that we can do a lot of these things that we all mentioned to you. This is the Rich Poland's map for our lab space. We have an imaging shop, ultrasound imaging, fabrication shop, an engineering testing fabrication center, a mock ICU, break room, social lounge, and a conference room. The idea is that when you walk in, you want to look at all the different 5 applications of ultrasound, whether it's imaging or flow sensing or neuromodulation or burning tumors. We have a neuromodulation system with a neuronav system. We have a Vantage system, Verasonics, that allows you to do research, store, study, and modify the data. And the idea is that once you walk in, you're going to have Apple Store, wooden tables, trying to be innovative vibe. And then on top of these wooden tables, you're going to have a mannequin, a phantom that has spinal cord, with probably silicone with microvasculature connected to a flow pump. And around that tables, you're going to have ultrasound systems to do imaging, sensing, therapy, store, study, modify, do research. Next to that, a wooden table with the water tanks that I showed you on top. My postdocs are sitting here. They store their stuff, ultrasound stuff here. This is a ultrasound hub. This is a fabrication shop. I'm being told we're going to have the first 3D metal printer in Maryland. So not Army or industry excluded. As an academic institution, we're going to have the first metal 3D printer. So you can 3D print titanium implants, or if Nick has an idea for a surgical retractor that's customized, we can do that. We're going to have a vinyl cutter, laser cutter, 3D scanner, 3D printer. We're going to store our mannequins here. And this is our fabrication shop. Like if you're a machinist, we would love to hear from you. I actually have an opening for a machinist. Once you walk here, it's the less fancy stuff, what I do, right? Oscilloscopes, network analyzers, soldering, microscope here. We have a mock ICU room, which is meant to have a patient table with a fancy, non-fancy mannequin on top of that. We're going to roll in our ultrasound systems or sensors. And once our surgeons are ready to test things in humans, once they have approval from FDA, once we got our animal studies done, then we want to know about the workflow. Remember, I made a big deal about workflow. Our surgeons will come in, they'll use the sensors on the mannequins, we'll videotape them, as creepy as it sounds. We'll videotape them, we'll time them out. We'll try to see if it was an easy learning curve for them. If they failed at something, then it's our bad as designers. We didn't design stuff that they could easily learn. So we'll look at the ease of use, the learning curve, we'll time them out, whether this device is adding time to the surgery or not, whether it's helping or hurting. Those are the stuff that FDA wants to know. So we're working with Armstrong Institute for patient safety and quality, a lot of amazing human factor experts to understand how these things will get into the surgical workflow. So we do ultrasound, we build things, we test things, and we do stuff in animal studies in another lab. Once we're done with those things, we test the workflow in our mock ICU room, we socialize, we're envisioning a nice coffee machine, and we meet a lot. I probably have about 50 hours a week of meetings on Zoom. Zoom fatigue is killing me, but we're thinking of a place to do that. Imaging capabilities we talked about. We have a system for research platforms so that if you have a hypothesis with clinical systems, you can change the parameters, frequency, power, this, that, gain, and then you can see what it changes. Once you're done, you're done. If you go and take a shower and you're kind of in the shower, I think, well, I wish I would have done this. Then there's no going back with a clinical system. However, if you have an ultrasound research platform, you could hypothesize. I could go and take my shower, take my break, eat something, and say, I should have done this. I have stored, studied, and modified the system, so you can come back and modify the system and test my hypotheses. You can buy a Vantage from Verasonics up until 256 channels. We order a custom one, 1024 channels. BrainBox is sending us their NeuroFUS systems, FUS, F-U-S, focus ultrasound. So this is meant for neuromodulation. So the idea is that this stethoscope looking like ultrasound probes are placed on your skull, and non-invasively, they're meant to help you treat PTSD, depression, anxiety. And we're trying to use that for nobody, ironically, has done ultrasound neuromodulation for spinal cord. We're trying to do that. So once we get that, our hands on that, combined with our neuronav system, brain side system, sky is the limit for neuromodulation. Remember I talked about mock ICU room? I mentor Richard BME undergrad, and I also mentor Jeff Kim, his electrical engineering, my master's student is about to graduate, and they've both built this mock ICU room, which is a voice-controlled, Alexa-based operating room. I'll let you guys see for about a minute. There's no blood here. You get the idea. So in the interest of time, I'll skip. But I think I want you guys to know that if you touch stuff, if you want to, a lot of times in the operating room, people actually go and there's this remote they touch to take the table up and down and call. And much like I'm getting calls when I'm talking, like surgeons will get the calls when they're in the operating room. So the ability to have these things voice controlled and secure and safe from an IT privacy perspective for patients, that's important. So it takes some engineering work. And Richard and Jeff are working towards that. We talked about the metal 3D printer, laser cutter, vinyl cutter, 3D scanner, and 3D printer, maker, bot, plug and play. If you have interest to make something with us, love to hear from you. And I'd like to end. I apologize for going over time. Just get excited when I talk about translation. Sorry for my passion. So everybody has a compass in life. I'd like to leave you with this thought. What is your compass in life? Again, the first thing I mentioned in the talk was, I've had the pleasure of working with Dr. Brem, Dr. Theodore, Dr. Khadam Hosseini. I've been inspired by Dr. Langer. But, we're different people and we have different strengths and weaknesses, different resources. They have different compass in life. We have different compass. Get to know yourself first. So if there's another journey, key take-home message is you need to get to know yourself. I was too much bogged down by getting to know others until I realized I don't know myself first. So 2 things or 3 things that helps me as my compass in life is I have this thing in one of the places I can see when I get up. If today were the last day of your life, would you want to do what you're about to do today? If the answer is no, engineer your life. If you're a creator, if you're an innovator, engineer and innovate and create your own life the way you want. Another compass of mine. Everybody you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Be kind. Third one. This is a famous Sadi poem. So the sons of Adam are limbs of each other, having been created of one essence. When the calamity of one affects one limb, the other limb cannot remain at rest. If you have no sympathy for the troubles of others, you are unworthy to be called by the name of a human. Don't like this translation, but that's the best I found outside. So whether you like William Robbins, Steve Jobs, Sadi or not, I love what they're saying here. So that's been my compass. What is yours? And with that, thank you for listening.
Well, thank you very much, Amir, for very, very interesting, very inspiring talk. I couldn't stop you, honestly, because I was enjoying every moment of your talk. You started with a little bit of background, and then you nicely transitioned into your recent high-tech work that you're doing with DARPA. It's amazing, and it's very. And I encourage others to also again listen to this talk again. I'm going to do that, and to actually one of the participants actually asked whether this will be recorded, and then the good news is that yes, it will be recorded and it will be posted on our YouTube channel. So watch this video again and then share it with your friends, grad students, early career researchers, and even more senior researchers, because I learned a lot, and I'm sure many of you will learn a lot from Amir's talk. So fascinating talk. Thank you, Amir, for this for sharing your journey with us. So I won't have time to go over my questions, so I'll bug you later. I'll call you and ask you many questions. These are my questions here.
Gladly. Gladly.
But I would like to ask my like the participants questions, and then a few of the questions are around the basically the idea of this implantable band-aid, which is a smart band-aid which will be in a closed loop system to do diagnosis and then treatment for patients with or people with a spinal cord injury. So the question is around the type of material, if you can share with us, that you're going to use for this, and then mainly whether this sensors are going to be implanted permanently in the body, and then if that's the case, then what is the type of material, and what considerations do you have in mind when you choose the material for this application?
Absolutely. Thank you. So I would say in terms of the type of materials, also, let me talk to Josh and the team and see what I can share. But what I like to mention in response to your question is we're going to need a different type of materials if this is for acute spinal cord injury patients versus chronic patients. We originally aimed for chronic patients. We said we want these things to stay. And the engineering that implant was way difficult, way different. And we actually need to think about biodegradability, right? And but I think what we got funded for was acute spinal cord injury patients, which is only about the patient triaging is like if you have an acute, subacute, or a chronic spinal cord injury. So I think what we're aiming for right now is trying to minimize that secondary injury, which happens in the acute and subacute. So the parameters that we're thinking about, the materials, are more geared towards biocompatibility for short term. And we're thinking about 1 month. We're not really thinking about long term. That's part of our vision. We would like to think about longer term. And so whether that becomes a long-term biocompatible system or biodegradable, that's probably another Darpa project, right? It's ambitious, but I'm glad you're thinking that, because that's probably one of the things we thought really hard and long about. Because when you work in multidisciplinary, anybody will bring their own perspective, which is very valuable. But the key is to make sure we don't over-engineer one aspect as opposed to another. I will share with you the choice of materials, but let me get back to you after I talk to my team.
Well, that's completely understandable. Thank you, Amir. I think even the details of the material is something that maybe maybe it may be confidential, especially due to the nature of the project that you're working on. But you already answered the question. So it's a short-term, basically implants, 1 month, and the material should be biocompatible and biodegradable. So is there going to be a secondary surgery to remove any of these connections, or there will be no connections to the implant?
Thanks. Another smart question. No, the key is not having another surgery. So for example, if you have this Acme insert, actually maybe I mentioned Acme as an implant. Maybe that is misleading because it's an insert, right? It's a catheter that is that's shoved inside that CSF intrathecal space, and the surgeons will just take it out right after the surgery. So there's not a major surgery involved, not even a minor surgery, but you do have that catheter that needs to be removed, and usually it's done in a way that the patient can still lie on their back, right? So within a few days, you probably want to take these things out, and the process is like you just like use a wire or like a tube and you just remove it.
Okay, so then but these tubings or these wires are going to be inserted for a few days. Do you have any concerns about infections?
Right, so great question. We do, but we're not changing anything from the workflow. So for example, when it comes to our music implant, that's a wireless device, right? So there's no wire. When it comes to our Acme insert, it's the catheter they're using all the time within their workflow. So we're not changing anything from that except for making it smarter through fiber optics, It's like inside it's filled with other things, but outside it's the same materials and the same workflow. Is there a risk for infection? Sure. Is there more risks? I don't think so.
Okay. So you're not trying to, find a solution for a problem that may not, that is not there still here. It's a problem that's they're already dealing with the surgeons. So that's very interesting and very very exciting. So there is a question from one of the participants. And it's not technical. It's mostly about your biggest challenges during your PhD and how did you overcome those challenges?
Right. I would say my biggest challenges all along, whether it was PhD or not, was being too ambitious. And right. And
you being too ambitious or your supervisor being too ambitious?
I think my biggest challenge was I was being too ambitious. So, right. Not that my advisors weren't ambitious. I think they were ambitious, but they were more reasonable than I was because they had seen multiple more stuff. And I was naive ambitious. So I was going to this committee for my PhD saying that I want to design, I want to build, I want to test, and I want to commercialize. And, they probably laughed internally, but they never brought up to me. But the committee member, I remember that the person who told me, you need to reduce the aims. And I said, which one? He yelled at me. He was like, you need to do this yourself. So I think, and I was adamant, my take on it was the perseverance and resilience that I mentioned to you. I said, you know what? Watch me. Was I reasonable? I wasn't. I was too much reactive and bogged down in my emotions. But in hindsight, I'm glad I was because, I wouldn't be happy just with just simulating something and moving on. Having said this, what I said, it doesn't mean that my advisors haven't pushed me from time to time to be a better version of myself. What I was referring to was when I'm defining the scope of even my grants. Remember the wall of shame that I showed to you? I'm glad I got rejected from a $200,000 grant because had I gotten that grant, I would not be able to deliver what takes $14 million to deliver, right? So, and when some of my mentors were telling me, dude, you're not focusing, you're submitting, you're throwing darts in all different, grants. I was like, no, watch me. I'll get it. Did I get it? Sure. Was it efficient? I'm not sure.
It was certainly efficient. Probably if you add up all the values on those, one of the columns for all those grants, it will be still less than what you got. So I think it was efficient in my opinion. So I will ask you one more question because we're getting closer to 10:30. I don't know about your schedule, Huma.
I'm fine until 2 on our time. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm okay. I'm okay, Mohsen. If you are okay,
I would like to ask a few more questions from you, Amir. So it takes a little bit longer than previous talks, but we have many questions, and then your talk was so amazing that I think we deserve to ask you questions.
Thank you. I'm all ears. So go ahead, please.
So we'll ask questions for the next few 15 to 20 minutes, and then we'll see how things go. So the next question is from another participant, and they are asking about your insights on patenting strategy for ultrasound related applications. Will it be based on the device design or the procedure? It's a very specific question.
Right. Will it be based on device design or procedure? Did I hear that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So procedure, does it mean clinical procedure? Can we ask for clarification? Let's see if they will respond.
Janway, can you in the chat box, can you
we can invite Janway on a screen because he's working at McGill.
Okay, why don't you?
Yeah. So yeah, I'll do that. Yeah.
I'll do it in absence of that. Yeah. So I think there are many different pathways towards building an IP portfolio. There's a design patent that's kind of concerned with the ornamental aspects of your device. Is that valuable? It is. But I think it's more valuable for an industry setting. So if you have a startup, they would tend to value industrial design patents. But if you go to your tech transfer office and you say, guess what? I have a design patent. they're not going to take it as seriously, because for them, the cost benefit is a little. Keep in mind, design patents is what Apple used to say, like, Samsung's mobile platforms are similar to ours, right? And they won the case. So design patents are to infringe the industrial design, ornamental aspects. When it comes to clinical workflow, yes, I've seen surgeons patenting ways to get to spinal cord, and can we use, like, the catheter, can we take it out this way? Does it have to be this approach or that approach? Is minimally invasive ways to get to brain and spinal cord patentable? They are. Is it infringible? I think courts don't look at it the same way that surgeons take it seriously, because for surgeons, it's their life. I know Al Cohen is known for the approaches of minimally invasive brain surgeries, different ways to get to the brain. But is a lawyer going to look at those IPs the same way? Probably not sure. I would say what's the most important is your hardware and your software. And even so, software patenting is questionable. So a lot of people say, well, not sure if software is patentable. The answer is that's right. But what may be patentable is your system and methods, or your method and system. So you have method and systems patents that you would say, this is the way I would control or drive this hardware. So you could patent your hardware. You could patent how you drive these things. But yes, if you go into MATLAB code, probably not. I think final thing is to say, when you start a spin-off startup, it's important to remove yourself, not be on the way of success of your startup. That's also what I learned from Paul Santerre. When I start working with a spin-off, for example, in this case, Neurosonics, I work with Dr. Gamal, who I saw her note here. She thinks about the success of her company. My ego may get on the way that I want to be on this patent and I want to have a huge patent portfolio. That may not be in the best interest of the company, because if she would listen to me, the cost benefit just falling for all those patents may be out of the roof, right? Does Tech Transfer Office listen to me? They listen, but they still do their own cost benefit as an institution, as a corporate world. So it's important to say that, I think final note about your question, is important to say that you could, if you find the right patent lawyer, you could claim a lot of things as patentable. These people are amazing at writing, finding, and fighting for claims, right? Unlike our papers that will get rejected easily, right? Your patents won't get rejected. So you will file for 32 claims and it will get challenged, and you may claim 32 claims, but you may end up with a granted patent that has 3 claims, right? So it's okay to claim more. You can claim more. The best patent lawyers will help you claim more. So theoretically, you can claim everything, all of the above. Practically, you can claim what your budget allows.
That's true. That's very true. And I think our industrial license officers who I think Chris and others who are on this talk will agree with you as well. So this is something that is that in terms of practicality, you need to think about the budget and then others as well. So this is a very important point. So the next question is about, it's again a very technical question. It's about the frequencies that you're working with in your implantable devices. Which frequency the implantable device will operate to send data from in-body to out-body? So again, that's a very technical question.
Right. Yeah. So I would say if you're thinking about what frequencies we use to use the ASICs chips to wirelessly drive our implants, that we're not sure yet. It's in the process of engineering. Believe it or not, that's one of our milestones. We have to compare different frequencies. But if you're asking what frequency we use to monitor perfusion, yeah, we're thinking about 20 megahertz, right? That type of frequencies, high imaging frequencies. While you can do 3 megahertz or 5 megahertz imaging, if you're thinking about, what neuromodulation frequencies we use for neuromodulation, the NeuroFuzz system by Sonic Concepts and BrainBox that I mentioned, they have 4 different probes. They have 0.5 megahertz, 1.5, 1.5, and 2.5 megahertz. So that's like on the lower side. I hope I answered that question. If not, happy to offline.
Sure. So the next question is about the method of numerical or the numerical tool that you use, or the method, the approach that you use. Have you used finite element modeling for simulating and modeling, or you use other techniques for all these computational modelings?
Right. This is where I love conversations, and I wish I could just ask them for clarification. If they're talking about simulations of ultrasound transducers, yes, both is applicable. There's this, for example, there's this software called piezoCAD, again, by Sonic Concept. It's a 1D element. It just tells you that if you have a piezoelectric crystal, piezo is pressure in Greek. So piezoelectric means pressure-driven electricity. You give them electricity, it starts vibrating. That pressure, the question that we ask to simulate is, how does it go from the crystal to the water to your media? We can send a pulse, try to hear the echo in a numerical modeling fashion, and that's 1D. So you get all beautiful plots. It's 1D. That's not final element modeling. If you're talking about K-wave or other things, it's more of a MATLAB base, so it's kind of up to you what you can make out of it. What is final element modeling is if you use something called PZ-Flex, or another one that I personally liked using, beautiful graphical user interface, it's Wave 3000. So you kind of see all these, if you have a trabecular bone, you see all these waves going in and out, and then kind of hitting all the boundaries and kind of scattering and reflecting. That's final element modeling based. So the answer is yes and no.
Okay, cool. So, and it depends on the application.
Right.
So what you want to model. So very good. So the next question, or the last question from the audience is about your, when do you envision these implantable devices be in the market? So how long will it take for these devices, the technologies that you're developing, to be usable in hospitals? So it's more about the application and then the future of this technology.
Yeah, I'm going to give you a patented answer that's never wrong. It depends. And it depends on the application, the intended use, and it depends on the regulatory pathway. So if you go, for example, remember the minimally invasive therapeutic ultrasound that I talked to you about, my second company? If you go to FDA and they say it's class 3, pre-market approval, then we have to get approved first. Class 2 is like pre-market notification. Hey, FDA, I'm doing this. Thank you. But if you have to wait for approval, obviously it's longer. It's more expensive. It's much longer. The way Neo and I thought about it was, if we don't do it now, then we're young and we have more time and energy. We know if we don't fail class 3 now, then we don't think we're going to take that risk later on in life. Again, that probably takes, I'm being told, never been successful in a PMA. I've been told anywhere between 10 to 20 years. If you're thinking about class 2, then I would say we're thinking about just a little under 10 years, right? And, thankfully, DARPA is all about pace. They're futuristic, they're ambitious, but they're also fast. They want us to act and produce. So I think within 5 years, we're going to, if things go well with our milestones, which I'm doing everything in my power to do, we're talking to FDA now as we're building stuff. We're going to do pre-animal studies, human studies, and FDA approval by the 5th year. A lot of work, never been done before, but our aim is 5 years.
So just to clarify, so you mentioned that you're going to do preclinical studies and clinical studies by year 5, or clinical studies will be after 5 years?
That's right. The third phase is human studies. So we need to implement in humans in the final year.
Okay.
But right now, as we started, we're doing the engineering work. We're talking to FDA. We started with rodent studies, rat studies. We're doing pig studies every month. So we're doing everything we can.
Okay, that's very good. So you're doing things in parallel. So that's very interesting and very well. That's how it works with DARPA, I think.
It takes a 50 people team. I can tell you.
Exactly.
That's not even enough. So.
It is. But again, I mean, you were ambitious, and this is an ambitious project. So ambitious projects are for ambitious people. So one take-home message for everyone, especially the students who may be on this call, is if you're ambitious, then you have to go after ambitious projects and work with ambitious people, and then I think Amir is there, so he is ambitious. He's working on an ambitious project. So why don't you just contact him and then work with him? So that's very, very interesting and exciting.
Yeah. Can I add something?
Okay, go ahead, Huma.
Yeah, just follow up to your note about being ambitious and working with ambitious people, because Amir also like noted in his presentation about being coachable. I just want because he was a coach. I mean, he was working with many mentors, and because we have many young scientists and students in the call. Amir, what do you think about being coachable and being humble and learn from your peers, mentors, and teachers?
Right. I'm glad you said that. Probably that's the most important interpersonal skills I look at when I interview. So it's important in hiring. It's important in firing. 90% of the firings is because of these issues. People get defensive when they're given a feedback, and they just push back and they just don't listen anymore. So being coachable is a learned skill set. So you can learn being coachable. You're not born coachable, or you're born coachable unless if you don't want to, right? So I would say being coachable is all about listening and not listen to what it's said, proactive listening. I talked about music, and this is an example that, maybe again, I said it's applicable. When you look at the maestros in Persian music, whether it's like Ustad Shajarian or Ustad Ali Sadeh, like they go to the biggest names. They went to the biggest name. Ustad Shajarian used to pick up, some of the old, famous singers. He would take them to a hike when these guys were old and like nobody around them, and they felt depressed and on their own, and they had all the time, on their hands. And Shajarian would take them to a hike, and he would spend a day with them and ask for help, ask for feedback, ask for a coach. He was proactively asking for feedback. When I talk to my mentor, I have mentors who, no matter what I do, they say it's still bad. You can still do better. And I have mentors that no matter how badly I fail, they tell me, we have full faith in you. You're going to succeed, this, that. Which one are right? Both. The answer is like, if you take that judgmental hat off, and once somebody's giving you feedback, you don't become reactive, take your ego out of the question, then they're both right. I have one person who is pretty assertive that I work with. I notice when he sends me emails, his first line is very aggressive. So what I do is I start from the second line. I read, I take it, I listen to him, and then I read his first line, and I'm kind of like, well, it's being him, right? So, but he has something to tell me. He has something that's worthwhile because that person's very achieved. So if I was going to kind of like reject that because I'm being dismissive, because my ego is at stake, who am I? What is my ego in the bigger universe, right? So be a listener, but not a passive listener. Be a proactive listener. Go talk to your mentors, ask them routinely, how can I help you? How can I take something off of your shoulder? Is there anything I can do better? Is there any feedback you have for me? Did you like how I handled this? Because I don't want you to be in a position to manage more things or even manage me, right? That's the type of feedback I would urge you to ask. And the sooner you learn that coachability, the sooner you become a better listener, the better you're off in your life.
Thank you so much, Amir.
I hope that was the answer you wanted to hear. So.
No, very good, very good. So, so with that, I think, well, I can ask you my questions offline later. We're running out of time. So with that, I would like to thank you, Amir, for your very, very nice presentation. I was impressed. I was very happy to be that you accepted our invitation and you gave a talk at this e-seminar series. So thank you very much. I also would like to thank the participants for joining this meeting today. As I mentioned, this meeting will be recorded and then we will post it on our YouTube channel. So I encourage you to watch it again, as I'm going to do that, and then also share it with your friends and colleagues. So thank you very much, and have a great day ahead.
Thank you so much, everybody, and Professor Manbachi.
My pleasure. Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.